From the moment I said yes to the idea of spending the rest of my life with Lisa, the whirlwind of preparations began. It was the most significant undertaking of my life, and it all started with a decision that had been brewing in my mind for 3 long years. Lisa and I had first crossed paths at my buddy Jake's birthday party. The second I laid eyes on her, a petite blonde in a charming summer dress, I was utterly captivated. That night, fueled by too much alcohol, we ended up waking up in the same bed the next morning. It was a first for me, and as we both opened our eyes, she murmured, "Just so you know, this has never happened to me before." I slid my arm around her, shrugged, and replied, "Don't worry about it." Little did I know, that tiny red flag was something I should have paid more attention to. But more on that later. From that day forward, Lisa and I became inseparable. We spent every evening together, alternating between her place and mine. A year later, I graduated from college and landed a job at an oil company, where I quickly climbed the corporate ladder. Before long, I had saved enough to buy a sleek apartment in a newly built complex, and I asked Lisa to move in with me. Life felt perfect. She took care of our home, and I threw myself into my work. As time went on, I was promoted to a management position, but the longer hours began to take a toll. Lisa hated how much I was away, but I tried to make it up to her with thoughtful gifts and surprises. Then one day, I fell seriously ill. Lisa nursed me back to health, doting on me and worrying endlessly. It was in that moment, as I lay there weak and vulnerable, that I realized I wanted to grow old with her and build a family. About a month after I recovered, we visited her parents. During dinner, I cleared my throat and asked for everyone's attention. Her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, turned to me expectantly, as did Lisa. We had always gotten along well, and they were happy their daughter had found someone they approved of. With my hands trembling, I looked into Lisa's eyes and said, "Lisa, I want you to be my wife." She said yes, and I slipped a ring with a modest diamond onto her finger. We set our wedding date for the anniversary of the day we met, just 2 months away. From that moment, everything kicked into high gear. Invitations, suits, dresses, catering, wedding planners, the works. I had envisioned a small, intimate gathering, but Lisa and her parents insisted on a grand celebration, calling it a once-in-a-lifetime event. As the wedding day approached, I noticed Lisa becoming distant and secretive. She was always busy with fittings, appointments, or procedures. I chalked it up to pre-wedding jitters and her desire to make everything perfect. But looking back, that was my first mistake. One afternoon, while at work, I decided to call her. "Hey babe, where are you?" I asked. "Where else would I be?" "I'm at home," she snapped. Something felt off, so I left the office early, picked up a lavish bouquet of flowers and a bottle of champagne, hoping to surprise her and ease the wedding stress. When I arrived at our apartment, I held the flowers up to the peephole and rang the bell. Silence. No one answered. I used my key to let myself in, and it was immediately clear she hadn't been home all day. "Lisa, you here?" I called out. Her voice came through the phone, sharp and defensive. "Nick, you already asked me that. Why are you checking up on me?" I hung up without another word, my mind racing. Why would she lie about being home? Where was she? My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of keys turning in the door. Lisa walked in, struggling with several heavy grocery bags. "Where were you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She looked startled to see me home so early. I was out getting a surprise ready," she stammered. I reached to help her with the bags, but she snapped, "I got it," pulling them away. My confusion deepened. "What's going on?" I pressed, my tone sharper this time. I managed to grab one of the bags and saw it was filled with takeout containers from a restaurant. I gave her a puzzled look. "What's all this food?" She sighed. "Look, I didn't have time to cook today, okay? I had a dress fitting and got behind schedule." "Then why lie about it?" I asked. "Because it's just a girl thing, Nick. I didn't want to bother you with it at work. I just want to look amazing on our wedding day, so you'll be proud of me." She stepped closer, stood on her tiptoes, and reached up for a kiss. We ended up making up in the bedroom, her go-to move whenever something felt off. And I have to admit, she was good at it. Later, we ate the takeout and popped the champagne, but my mind was still swirling with unanswered questions. Finally, the big day arrived. I pulled up to the venue where she was getting ready for the ceremony, and when I saw her, I was utterly speechless. She looked breathtaking in a white gown adorned with tiny crystals and delicate floral accents. The deep neckline showcased a stunning necklace that caught the light with every movement. She was radiant, and for a moment, All my doubts faded away. But as I stood there, taking in the sight of her, I couldn't shake the lingering questions that had been gnawing at me. The day was perfect, but beneath the surface, something felt unresolved. The sight of her took my breath away. She wore a small, sparkling tiara that caught the light with every movement, and my heart swelled with pride and joy. That's my wife, I thought, my chest tightening with emotion. My stunning bride. As we sat in the limo on the way to the ceremony, I leaned in close, my voice low and teasing. I can't wait to peel all this off you, I whispered, my lips brushing her ear. She responded with a shy smile, her cheeks flushing as she took a delicate sip of champagne. In that moment, I felt like the luckiest man alive. But little did I know, I would never get that chance. The ceremony at City Hall was simple and traditional, just as we'd planned. Afterward, we embarked on a photo shoot around town, capturing memories against the backdrop of the city we both loved. By evening, we arrived at the grand two-story house we'd rented in the suburbs for the reception. Our guests were already there, waiting to celebrate with us. The MC, grinning from ear to ear, announced, "Bread and salt for the newlyweds." Lisa and I each took a bite of the symbolic loaf, a gesture meant to bring prosperity and harmony to our marriage. We sat down, ready to enjoy the festivities. The toasts were heartfelt, the games were lively, and the constant chorus of "kiss, kiss" from our guests kept us laughing. But as the night wore on, Lisa drank more and more, until she was barely able to stand by midnight. I was holding my own, but irritation simmered beneath the surface. My new wife was completely trashed, and it wasn't exactly the romantic vision I'd had for our wedding night. At one point, I stepped away for a moment, only to hear the MC shout, "The bride has been kidnapped." It was a typical wedding gag, and I assumed it was just the best man orchestrating some silly ransom game involving chores or cash. But something felt off. Lisa had disappeared without a trace, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I suspected she might have passed out somewhere upstairs, so I decided to find her myself. I crept up the stairs, the house eerily quiet. Strange, I thought. I was sure she'd gone up here. But when I reached the top, there was no sign of her. I headed back down, only to find her already at the table, surrounded by guests who were doubled over with laughter. "What's so funny?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. The MC explained that Jake, my friend who had introduced us, had brought Lisa back from wherever she'd been hiding. I forced a smile, telling myself it was just a harmless prank. One less thing to worry about, I thought. Not long after, Lisa complained of a splitting headache and said she needed to lie down. I offered to help her, but her cousin Ryan suddenly stepped in. "Let me take her up, man," he said. "You know the guests are going to freak out if both of you disappear." Reluctantly, I agreed, and the two of them headed upstairs together. As some of our guests began to leave, I thought I'd join Lisa soon. But just then Mary, my childhood friend, slipped into the seat next to me. We'd once joked as kids that we'd get married someday, but as we grew older, that fantasy faded into a distant memory. "I can't believe you actually went through with this wedding," she said quietly, her voice tinged with something that sounded almost like regret. "Why wouldn't I?" I asked, surprised by her tone. "Because Lisa was seeing Jake when you two first hooked up," she revealed. "Then she switched to you that same night." My ears started ringing. Jake and Lisa had never told me they were dating at the time. Furious, I raced upstairs to confront her. I flung open the bedroom door, and what I saw shattered me. There was my new wife, half out of her wedding dress, entangled with her cousin Ryan by candlelight. I froze, my mind struggling to process the scene before me. Then the anger erupted. I started yelling, my voice echoing through the house. Guests downstairs heard the commotion and came rushing up, their faces a mix of shock and confusion. I stood there, my thoughts a chaotic whirlwind, trying to piece together what was happening. Finally, I managed to speak. "Lisa, how could you? Ryan is your cousin." A strange hush fell over the onlookers, followed by hushed whispers. Lisa's sister Sarah finally broke the silence. "What do you mean, cousin? Ryan is my boyfriend." I stared at Lisa and Ryan, both frantically trying to cover themselves. Lisa began to cry, her voice trembling. "Nick, I'm sorry. Please forgive me." My brain was on overload. I couldn't stay there another second. I shoved my way past the crowd and stumbled out into the chilly night air. I collapsed onto a bench, the cold biting at my skin as a single hot tear rolled down my cheek. I didn't know what to do next, except for one thing. I would be filing for divorce. A few minutes later, Jake showed up. "Come on, man," he said, his voice steady. Let's get out of here. Crash at my place tonight. We'll figure it out in the morning. I was grateful for his offer. I couldn't bear the thought of going home with Lisa. The next day, I marched straight to the county clerk's office and filed for divorce. Lisa must have known she couldn't talk her way out of this, because she never even tried to call me. As it turned out, she'd been sneaking around with her sister's boyfriend for a while. 1 month later, I heard they filed for their own marriage license. And that was how my marriage to the girl who had hooked up with me on the very first night ended almost as soon as it began. The woman I thought was my forever had turned out to be a stranger, and the life I'd imagined with her crumbled in an instant.